One question that I'm often asked is, what are the best fat burner supplements? That's a good question. I mean, we're besieged by all these various supplements that claim to effectively just shed all the fat off your body safely and effectively. But what's the truth? The truth of the matter is most advertised fat supplements don't work as advertised. The best that can be said about them is that they are adjunctive aids to diet and exercise. In some cases, they can produce toxic effects, especially in the liver. In fact, some of the substances I'm going to mention further along in this video have actually caused liver problems in some people. It's idiosyncratic, meaning it doesn't happen very often. It's probably due to certain genetic changes called polymorphisms that occur in genes in certain people that make them more susceptible to having problems. But the problem with that is you don't know you're such a person until you take the supplement, but there's ways around that, which I'll also explain. But there's a couple of supplements that seem to actually help promote body fat reduction. But I will add the notable caveat that they don't work in isolation. There's no way of getting around the fact that you have to exercise and you have to follow a judicious diet to effectively lose body fat. A lot of people discount the effects of exercise. They say it's all diet. The truth of the matter is diet is most important when it comes to losing excess body fat. There's no question about it. If you don't go on a diet, you could exercise your head off. You'll lose a certain amount of fat, but not really, not effectively. You have to combine the two. Diet alone is not sufficient, because if you diet alone and you don't exercise, there's a good chance, especially if it's not a high protein diet, that you're going to lose a lot of lean mass or muscle tissue. When that happens, your resting metabolic rate goes down, and when that happens, your metabolism gets so low that it's almost guaranteed that you'll gain the weight back, which explains why up to 95% of people who go on diets and lose substantial amounts of weight gain all the weight back within a year, because what's happened is that they've dieted either too strictly or they didn't do exercise. I had a complete article about in my Applied Metabolics about why exercise fails to promote body fat loss. For those who want more detail on this, however, there's always reasons for it. So with that in mind, let's talk about a couple of substances that are actually can actually really aid the fat loss process. Although again, alone, they don't do as much as you might expect. Probably the most popular one is definitely caffeine. Caffeine, I know it's funny to call it a supplement, but it's found naturally in coffee and other substances. But I list it here because caffeine is actually the primary ingredient in about 90% of so-called fat-burning supplements, and for good reason, because there is good evidence that caffeine is an actual fat mobilizer. It stimulates the release of what they call catecholamines, such as norepinephrine and epinephrine. These chemicals, or these hormones, if you want to call them, or proteins, they work to initiate a cascade in fat cells or lipocytes. For example, they stimulate an enzyme in fat cells called hormone-sensitive lipase, which basically stimulates the release of stored fat. It breaks fat is stored in fat cells as triglyceride, which is three fatty acids attached to a glycerol backbone. And when you take stimulate caffeine, when you take caffeine, it stimulates, as I said, these catecholamines, which in turn stimulate hormone-sensitive lipase, which in turn stimulates the enzymes that cause the breakdown or the breakdown of stored fat into its components of free fatty acids and glycerol. They enter the bloodstream, and if you're active and you're utilizing more oxygen and exercise, you can actually burn that fat. However, if you, for example, take a fat burner supplement and do what a lot of people do, which is just sit around and expect it to burn fat doing nothing, it might, if it contains components that will stimulate catecholamine release, like caffeine, it will cause the fat cells to release the fat, but the fat will circulate in the blood, and then if you don't burn it up through exercise, it'll go right back into the fat cells. It's called reesterification. So you really don't get much benefit. You have to exercise to burn the fat. As in a 1980 study, a dose of caffeine equal to 8 milligrams per kilogram of body weight was compared with a placebo in normal weight subjects. The metabolic rate increased significantly during the 3 hours after caffeine ingestion, while plasma glucose, insulin, and carbohydrate oxidation did not change significantly. Plasma free fatty acid levels rose significantly, and it was accompanied by a significant increase in fat oxidation during the last hour of the test. Another study showed that caffeinated coffee increased energy expenditure by 16% over a 1 to 2 hour period compared with decaffeinated coffee. A 1989 study showed that single-dose oral administration of 100 milligrams of caffeine increased the resting metabolic rate of both lean and post-obese human volunteers by 3 to 4% over 150 minutes and improved the defective diet-induced thermogenesis observed in the post-obese subjects. Let me explain that last part. One of the problems that obese people have is a defect in what is called thermogenesis, whereby when lean people or people with less body fat eat a meal, a lot of the calories are converted through the process of digestion into heat. It's called a feudal energy cycle. And because these calories are converted into heat, they're not stored. So the calories are actually more or less burned out. And this particular situation or scenario is defective in people that are obese. And a lot of times when people with high body fat levels go on a diet, they'll lose body fat if they exercise and diet sufficiently, but they still have a defect in diet-induced thermogenesis, which will unfortunately kind of also push them back to gaining the weight back because they're not burning the same amount of calories after eating a meal. If you take caffeine and some of the supplements I mentioned, it'll basically overcome the diet-induced thermogenesis. So at least that aspect of fat gain will be reduced. Caffeine helps the body burn more fat, but the effect is greater, unfortunately, in lean people compared to those of high body fat levels. A lot of people don't know that. I know it's kind of ironic that caffeine works better to reduce fat or body fat in people that are already lean than obese, but that's just the way it is. Now, another supplement that's pretty good that you see in a lot of fat burner, or I should say an ingredient that you see in a lot of fat burner supplements, which is also sold alone as a standalone supplement, is green tea extract. Green tea extract is simply a concentrated form of green tea. It's I think I don't remember offhand, but the average capsule of green tea extract is usually equal to about 4 to 5 cups of actual green tea. Green tea extract has been shown to reduce body fat. The active compound in green tea is, again, caffeine and a polyphenol called EGCG. These two compounds complement each other and help you burn fat through a process called thermogenesis. Again, that's the conversion of fat calories into heat. In simple terms, let me explain. In simple terms, thermogenesis is a process in which your body burns calories to produce heat. An analysis of six studies found that taking a combination of green tea extract and caffeine helped people burn 16% more fat than a placebo. Another study showed that the combination of green tea and caffeine burned roughly 65 more calories per day than caffeine alone, and 80 more calories compared to a placebo. Now, a problem with caffeine is that if you take, I'm talking about green tea extract rather than green tea itself, but if you take huge amounts of green tea extract, not only is it kind of hard on your liver, but it also will actually inhibit thyroid gland or thyroid hormone release, which is not good because then your resting metabolism goes down and you can actually gain fat. This is very rare occurrence, and you'd have to take a lot of green tea extract, probably about 10 pills a day for it to affect your thyroid. I've never seen it happen in anyone who's used green tea. I've used green tea. It's never happened to me. So it would take a pretty, more or less a vast amount of green tea extract to adversely affect thyroid function, contrary to some stupid websites that talk about it. An effective dose of green tea is about 500 milligrams a day. But again, some people experience liver problems when consuming green tea supplements. This has to do with those polymorphisms DNA that I talked about earlier. It's again very hard to tell if you have this genetic defect. One way to possibly prevent it is not to take green tea. I'm sorry, green tea extracts alone, like with a glass of water, but rather take it with a meal, because the studies have shown that when you take the green tea extract with a meal rather than alone, it seems to reduce or prevent the liver problems that are associated with green tea extract. Another substance, or if you want to call it supplement, that seems to help you lose body fat is soluble fiber. There's two kinds of fiber: insoluble and soluble. Insoluble fiber is stuff like bran. It's found in wheat. That type of fiber is great for helping to prevent constipation and other digestive problems. Soluble fiber is a little bit different. Soluble fiber, basically, as the term says, it can't be broken down by the human enzyme digestive enzymes, but it can be used as a food by intestinal bacteria, the intestinal microbiome, which is a very good thing, because the intestinal microbiome, which is the collection of fungi, bacteria, various organisms that reside in the colon, are extremely important to health, but beyond the scope of this video. I've written about it in Applied Metabolics if you need more information about that. But let's say that the intestinal microbiome affects everything from brain function to cardiovascular function to digestion of nutrients like carbohydrates and proteins, as well as many, many other things. 99% of your immune system involves a communication between the intestinal microbiota and the immune system itself. Soluble fiber helps you to lose fat by decreasing appetite. It slows the gastric transit of food, so the food takes longer to digest. As a result, you get a more filling effect, and it also helps to reduce body fat by increasing the release of certain gut hormones associated with lower appetite, such as PYY and glucagon-like peptide 1. And it also reduces ghrelin, which is another gut hormone, which is the most appetite-stimulating compound produced in the human body. Ghrelin rises between meals and causes hunger, which makes you want to eat. And when you eat a meal, the ghrelin levels drop right after the meal, then gradually rise between the meal. This is nature's way of guaranteeing that you eat so you don't starve yourself to death. Unfortunately, ghrelin can get a little out of hand in some cases and overstimulate appetite, making you voraciously hungry. So anything that can control ghrelin, like soluble fiber, would definitely be a benefit. Another trick is if you have a simple carbohydrate, such as let's say a refined carbohydrate or carbohydrate that doesn't include fiber. If you take the carbohydrate and take a little bit of soluble fiber with it, the soluble fiber will slow down the absorption of the simple carbohydrate or simple sugar, and doing so will greatly reduce the release of insulin, which in turn will have itself produce a fat loss effect. Just a little trick. Eating soluble fiber can reduce the number of calories that can be absorbed from food, because the fiber almost kind of locks on to certain foods, particularly fat. The soluble fiber will lock on to any dietary fat, not all of it, but some of it, and it'll cause the fat to literally pass right through your body, so you don't absorb the calories. And that, of course, would mean less calories, and less calories mean less body fat. Good sources of soluble fiber include beans, oatmeal, and fruit. Another popular supplement often talked about as a fat loss agent is yohimbine. Yohimbine was first gained prominence as a treatment for erectile dysfunction in the form of a drug called Yohimbine. Yohimbine was the original erectile dysfunction drug until other drugs that are considered more effective, such as Viagra and Cialis, came on the market. However, there's some studies that show that combining about 3 grams of yohimbine with about 3 grams of arginine actually does help erectile function in some men. What is yohimbine? Yohimbine is a chemical found in the bark of the yohimbine tree, which grows it's an evergreen tree native to Central and Western Africa. How does yohimbine work? By blocking alpha-2 adrenic receptors. Now, alpha-adrenic receptor, you have, let's say, different kinds of adrenic receptors that interact with fat cells. The beta receptors, like beta 2 receptors, promote the release of fat from fat cells, whereas the alpha 2 receptors actually inhibit the release of fat from fat cells. And one way it does that is by inhibiting the effect of the catecholamines that I mentioned earlier, epinephrine and norepinephrine, in causing the release of fat from fat cells. In other words, the alpha and true adrenic receptors inhibit that process. So if you take something like Yohimbine, which blocks the alpha 2 receptors, now the epinephrine and norepinephrine can work on the fat cells, cause the release of fat, and therefore promote loss of body fat. A study of 20 elite soccer players found that taking 10 milligrams of Yohimbine twice daily helped them shed 2.2% of their body fat on average in only 3 weeks. Those consuming Yohimbine lost nearly 30% more fat and experienced 31% greater reductions in body fat percentage compared to those in the placebo group. I'm also familiar with another study of women which showed that taking the Yohimbine before exercise on an empty stomach actually helped them to tap into the stubborn lower body fat, such as on the hips, upper thighs, and buttocks, that are the bane of most women. Taking Yohimbine seems to help to tap into that fat. And then the reason for that is that women in those particular areas of the body have a preponderance of alpha-2 adrenic receptors, and they're there for a reason. They're there to ensure that a woman has enough fat on her body to support a pregnancy, which takes a minimal 80,000 calories. So the human female body evolved to have these fat stores in the hips, thighs, and buttocks to make them recalcitrant or stubborn to fat release, to ensure that fat stays there so it can support a pregnancy, even if a woman decides she doesn't want to become pregnant or have a child. Nature doesn't give a crap. The only thing nature wants is the perpetuation of the species. So anything you could do to Yohimbine might aid that process. But the effective dose of Yohimbine is 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That translates into a dose of 11 milligrams for someone weighing 120 pounds, or 18 milligrams for someone weighing 200 pounds. It should be taken on an empty stomach. If you take any food with it, even caffeine, it will reduce the effects of Yohimbine and make it not work at all. The Yohimbine begins to work about 10 minutes after oral intake. It can cause side effects in some people. This greater release of catecholamines in some people can initiate serious panic attacks and cause nausea and anxiety, and even in rare cases, high blood pressure. Again, it's because of the increased catecholamines that result from taking Yohimbine. Another possible fat loss aid is a supplement called 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptamine, which is a precursor for serotonin. Tryptophan is turned into 5-HTP, which is then turned into tryptophan. 5-HTP works by lowering appetite, and it especially lowers the craving for carbohydrates. Those of you who follow low carbohydrate diets, you might want to keep a bottle of 5-HTP around in case you get a severe craving for carbohydrate. That's caused by a lowering of serotonin in the brain. If you take a 5-HTP supplement, it'll greatly reduce the craving for carbohydrates. Synephrine was introduced in the supplement market as a replacement for ephedrine, which was removed from the commercial sales because of dubious reasons back in 2004. A couple of studies show that it may boost fat oxidation during exercise, and I'll have an article in my Applied Metabolics explaining all the nuances of Synephrine and how it can actually increase fat oxidation during exercise. Carnitine is often considered a fat burner. Carnitine is, of course, the function of carnitine is to transport short-chain fatty acids into the mitochondrial portion of cells where the fat is oxidized. So carnitine definitely is involved in fat oxidation. In fact, without carnitine, you can't oxidize fat. It's essential. Carnitine is made in the body from 3 amino acids, so it's essential to health. The problem with carnitine supplements is that the studies show that when you take an oral carnitine supplement, your blood levels of carnitine go up tremendously, but the carnitine does not get into the muscle. And the muscle is the site of action of the fat burning. But some studies done in the last couple of years showed if you take a rather large amount of simple carbohydrate or high glycemic index carbohydrate, which promotes, I should say, a substantial release of insulin, you can increase the carnitine content in muscle by 15%. That doesn't sound like much, but it actually makes a big difference when it comes to fat oxidation. Of course, the consumption of 95 grams of carbohydrate, which is the recommended amount, if you take that several times a day, that's, to me, is going to obliterate any fat loss effect you get from the oxidation. It's kind of like a dog chasing its own tail, if you think about it. Now, I also want to point out a major problem with fat burner supplements is that they're often contaminated with drugs. For example, some of the fat loss supplements have sibutramine, which was a drug that was originally prescribed to treat obesity, but removed from the market because it's associated with cardiovascular toxicity. Some fat burner supplements actually have this stuff added to it, which could be very dangerous to anyone who has any kind of occult heart problem. It could push you into having a heart attack or stroke. And there's other drugs and substances that are sometimes added to fat loss supplements. I discuss this in detail in an upcoming article in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, where I discuss all the facts about possible contamination of common food supplements. It's an essential reading for anybody who takes food supplements, and it'll shock you when you read this article. So that's about it for that's about really some of the more effective fat burner substances. The reason I talked about these in particular is there is some research to show that it works. Of course, fat burner supplements have many, many other ingredients. A lot of them are esoteric herbs and compounds. And if you check the medical literature, you often find that there's literally no human verification of any fat loss function of these substances at all. The only thing that exists is animal studies or in vitro or isolated cell studies, which don't always translate to human physiology. So my point is, just because you see a big list of ingredients on a fat burner supplement doesn't mean a thing, because I'd say about 90% of them don't do a damn thing except allow the seller of the supplement to boost the cost of the supplement because you think you're buying a really extensive supplement. You're not. But that's about it. If you want further information about nutrition, exercise science, hormonal therapy, fat loss techniques that do work, anti-aging research you can use today, supplement science, ergogenic aids, women's health and fitness, and many other topics, subscribe today to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you it's about 40 to 50 pages every month, in depth, very, very in depth. If you think these videos are in depth, they are just scratching the surface compared to my newsletter. I compared these videos. These videos are like the headline on a newspaper. I mean, it gives you some information, but if you want to read the details, you got to read the article. And that's the way my newsletter compares to videos. So subscribe today. Again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, medicine, and general health. Again, that's only for current subscribers to Applied Metabolics. I have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics webpage where current subscribers only, I don't accept unsolicited questions, can submit short questions to me. I'll be happy to answer if you're a current subscriber. You're welcome to leave comments under this video, which I probably won't answer. I don't have the time. Very, very unlikely that I'll answer comments. However, anyone else is welcome to answer somebody else's questions. Fine with me. And if you want to leave suggestions for future videos, that's fine too. If I feel that the topic will interest a broad amount of people, I'll try and do a video on it. And so that's about it. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. Thank you for listening.